This is about George Martin and the Beatles. I've seen too many shows over the years about Mr. Behind the Scenes, George Martin, the record producer, composer, arranger, musician, and member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, to the point where I feel I have to write a little piece about him. This is especially true now because I have been thinking about collaboration in producing a work of art, and that certainly seems to be the case when it comes to George Martin and his work with the Beatles. The Beatles, of course, were a band, and a band is the very essence of collaboration, a pooling of talents, that marvelous, nearly magical meshing of minds and sympathies, the beauty and majesty that can result from working together until, for whatever reasons, usually foremost ascribed to egos clashing instead of melding, and then it breaks apart and the band is no more. They disband. Martin worked with many musicians and comedians as well: Spike Milligan, Peter Sellers, Dudley Moore, and others. He produced the recording of Beyond the Fringe, and he was actively looking to work with a young band, get into the rock and roll scene that was beginning to take hold in England. The Beatles, then just four lads from Liverpool, no place you'd ever expect to produce an artist of any sort, much less a band of them, and they could not get a company to record them. No interest. They did have a manager, Brian Epstein, and he had a meeting with George Martin. Martin liked Epstein and agreed to listen to an audition tape. The Beatles played 4 songs. Martin listened to the tape and found nothing that piqued his interest. Epstein urged him to listen to the band in person, and Martin said, okay. They came to the studio and played 4 more songs, but again, in Martin's estimation, they came up short. He asked the 4 young men what they thought was wrong, what might be changed and improved. George Harrison said, well, for one thing, your tie. The joking continued, and Martin agreed to work with them solely on the basis of this good feeling about them as people, not musicians. So began the work of the sober adult in the suit, the technician, and the 4 frolicking, frequently high musicians. Along with the music, marijuana was coming into fashion, another element in the mix. Basically, the boys came in and played their songs, just as they did in clubs, and Martin recorded them, all very straightforward. His first piece of advice was to speed up the tempo of Please Please Me. They did, and that was a big success. After several big hits, the Beatles began to write songs that were not simply pop love fluff, especially McCartney's Yesterday. Martin loved the song and told McCartney it was going to be a great smash, and he encouraged him to record it with strings. McCartney, a Liverpudlian after all, had no love of classical music, and he objected. Martin showed up one day with a score and a group of musicians, and McCartney wrote on the score, Yesterday, by McCartney and Lennon, Martin and Mozart. The strings obviously worked, and they were even more effective as the only instrumental accompaniment to the fantastically challenging, musically surging Eleanor Rigby. After that, the act of recording, especially with the multi-track system created by Les Paul, became a key factor in the sound, in the sound of the music. They could speed it up, slow it down, play it backwards, create whole new sounds. Martin called it painting with music. It started with the song Rain, A Toe in the Water, and they added the Indian elements in Within You, Without You, that horn playing in Penny Lane, and after that the Beatles gave up touring because they could not hear themselves play through the screaming, and, more importantly, they could not play the music they were truly interested in, music that could only exist in a studio, like Abbey Road. And that naturally, if also startlingly, led to Sgt. Pepper, an album that astounded people when they heard it, and changed what you could do with music, as well as how you could make it sound, filled with special effects. All of this was made possible by the joint efforts of at least 5 people, probably more, and it certainly represented a peak in their artistic creation. Martin was unavailable, working on other projects, when they made the White Album, which showed them in the process of breaking up. They did disband, went their separate ways, had their isolated achievements, but behind them there was always that collaborative peak.